for the European AIDS Treatment Group.
Now I know that why I never took the catwalk. Graceful is hardly the word that can describe me, let alone my body mass index, you know. Thanks for inviting us. By us, I don't mean the Royal We, but the European AIDS Treatment Group, because David has already spoken on our behalf. I will try to wear my, excuse me, my three hats here. The trainer within the European AIDS Treatment Group, as well as I work for a small commercial entity called SEFT Limited, and we work in the field of research methodology as well as community development. And also I've been for many years a treatment counselor in a small community-based organization called HIV based in London, UK. Mainly the information that I would like to present has to do with HIV and hepatitis, and I would like to start with the good news, which is that from the more than 1,000 people that we have trained among the HIV, hepatitis and TB communities, research methodology, clinical trials, protocol reviews, as well as drug development come up as a rule within top 3 of the topics that people want to hear about. Why this is a good news? Because some colleagues may argue with me, but the HIV community, as if we are a bit better served than some other communities within Europe, people coming from the background of different conditions. What works in our experience in terms of provision of training, I would go quickly through a Q&A sort of speech. Who should do the training? We divide the trainings into 2 major groups, namely basic and more advanced. The basic ones, we have the experience that it works better if it's provided by a peer, simply because people feel more comfortable, people can ask their questions, they don't feel stupid, they don't feel embarrassed, and they're just happy to do it. The more advanced ones, the ones we have at the European Community Advisory Board, where the so-called concept of patient experts come. We have usually people coming from the academia. By some reason, as if people do not take trainings organized by the pharmaceutical companies as serious as the trainings organized by the community itself, inviting academia speakers. Now, why that is, it has to do with certain ethoses within some organizations. I personally do not necessarily buy into that, because quite often the people who work for pharmaceutical companies actually do the thing here and now. So it's a great opportunity for many of us to ask the questions that we may want to ask them. But again, it's a decision of the organization doing the training to decide whether and whom they want to invite. The means of delivery of the information, as well as the skills, we have tried different paradigms in our work, and starting from the more fluid ones, the type of, let us start with doing a informed consent together, how it should look according to you. And we start from zero, from a blank page, to the more classical ones, the TTT that everybody is aware about, I'm sure, namely test, teach, test. We have, however, tweaked it a bit, and in our format it looks like test, teach, test, and follow up. We find so far this as the best approach for our work. How do we do this? The test in the beginning, we do a very in-depth needs assessment, followed by a face-to-face training with follow-up electronic component. Now, there are many people who mentioned already webinars and web-based trainings. Our experience says that the face-to-face followed by a webinar or something else works better, not because of any other reason, but there is the contact that we have with the people, and we have more lost follow-up when we have the webinar only. Namely, we announce it, there are many people who subscribe to it, and then many of those either do not appear or shortly afterwards disappear. I understand that it depends a lot on the quality of the service that we provide, but as if face-to-face followed by electronic version works better in our case. I understand the webinars can be cheap, quick, and cheerful, but again, make your mind what you prefer and how you want it. What people like during the trainings in our experience, again, is hands-on. If we do something like randomization, we just ask people to throw coins and see how it works practically. We also, by some reason also people like case studies. Just give them a short explanation or description of something and you can leave them for an hour and a half afterwards to discuss the case, and they do love it, and a lot of info comes out of those. As well as people do like protocol review, because the concept of participating in a DSMB, or what the more modern word now is DMC, if I'm correct, the data monitoring committees, is quite popular not only among hepatitis C as well as HIV communities, but in other conditions as well. How do we test the people afterwards? It turned out that having the testing on a website where we provide a special website with questions works better than actually delivering on-the-spot hard copies of the test, because for some reason people like the guilty pleasure of being able to be alone and to kind of hiddenly take a look at their notes, fill it correctly. I guess it's our psychology of being winners and getting it right. But again, even in that way, we get to about 80% response rate when we use it, when we use this particular website after the training for the testing, and still 70% of the respondents wouldn't give their names and contact details. And finally, the follow-up we provide it in two ways. We provide results, namely we give money to the trainees in order to do something that they find useful out of the training. The money is not a huge one. We usually go for something like 5,000 to 10,000 euros per group. And we are happy to say that the majority of the people want, at least in a certain percentage, to replicate the training that we have done, but on their own. Needless to say, we give them manuals of how to do it, and we provide them with technical support. So we are aiming at having this multiplication effect. In a way, our job is well done if we are in a situation where we can simply turn and leave and everybody is happy and people can do it on their own. Yes, the type of people who are interested, I would use the vulgar American expression, it's either personal or profitable. So provide incentives if you want to have more people who are interested in participation. And somebody mentioned also the social media, Facebook, Twitter, as if people prefer to use Facebook not for training activities, but for other personal stuff. To the extent that we decided once to have a Facebook group on discussion of clinical trials, and one of the participants, he wasn't alone, but his explanation to me was quite clear. He said, you are coercing me to open a Facebook account. I did that, and in 2 days, I had every single person of whom I wanted to get rid of for the last 20 years to reappear in my life. So we weren't happy with that feedback, but part of life, you know. And finally, I would like to put some stress on certain sensitivities, the cultural ones. People were speaking about the languages here. And as a multilingual person myself, we quite often keep on repeating the mantra of go local, go local, go local. Now, local may mean many things, and there are specificities there. For instance, when I do a training in Russian language in Russia, or in Bulgarian or something else, any of the Slavic languages that you can imagine, some of the terminology that is perfectly acceptable and perfectly all right in English, and we understand it all right, does not exist into those languages. So we are often in a position, and I don't know how exactly you are going to be doing the translation, but in a way we need to go for a new term or descriptively, narratively give the term that is into existence in English language. To the extent, however, that sometimes literally directly borrowing the word is also a way forward. Like in Bulgarian, there wasn't the word randomization, and we were saying на случайен принцип, which means on a random basis, but the participants in the training simply started using randomization, which became a part of the language nowadays. And it goes to many others. One more example, we should not presume that certain languages are better than others in certain settings. I was doing a training in Transnistria. Perhaps you've heard about that place. It's not one of the places where one can go for a holiday. And we presumed that apart from Russian, that we were doing the presentations, the next language that people would prefer is English, simply because it's easy to translate from English into into Russian. It turned out that the majority of the people there, knowing Moldavian language and coming from old-time kind of background, they knew French way, way better than they will ever know English. So certain presumptions, we need to clear them and make sure that we do it right in the very beginning. And finally, also another cultural issue, certain settings have a long-term tradition that differs from the Western one, like Russia, Ukraine, and so on. They have the Semashko system of public health, and certain things like prevalence and incidence that are an everyday term in our discourse here in the West do not mean much in those countries because they use a denominator, in epidemiology, for instance, a denominator of number of patients per 100,000. So to them, explaining, especially to the medical professionals and researchers, what the prevalence and incidence is may not necessarily be the right thing to go forward because it gives them a shock to the system sometimes. And I would like here to stop and to thank you and my contacts. If there are organizations or community-based organizations who are interested in organizing seminars or trainings for their local communities, I'm very happy to help. My contacts are in the folder. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? If not, I have one question. You spoke about, for the online training, you spoke about doing webinars. Were there other types of online training that you were involved with other than webinars? And were there some types of online training that worked better than others?
Well, I'm sure about that. We have tried so far webinars alone. And it was as a result of an advice that we've received of a professional, because they were saying that the webinars are the way forward, but I'm more than happy to see into other options, really.